What is up, you guys? Glitchiz here, and welcome back to the channel. Today I am bringing you the long anticipated wizard build for the Wake of the Water update. It's probably one of the most requested videos that you guys have asked for. I've got a couple more updates coming, obviously, for the Hunter and Warrior class, but I personally tend to main the Mage class anytime a new update drops, so I figured this would be a good one to start with. But I will say right out of the gate that it's going to be stronger and pretty broken in comparison to my previous updates wizard build, because some of the new mechanics within the Wake of the Water update in regards to the soak status and things like that are kind of broken and pretty strong. I will say that other classes, especially the Archer, I feel like is a little bit stronger this time around, but the build that I'm about to show you guys can easily handle any of the content in the game all the way through the latest update and the highest level content there is. So no need to worry about that. So without any further ado, let's jump into it. So let's start off with armor. So the best in slot for this build, for the boots, I'm using the Tide Collar shoes. This has plus 24 mana regeneration, a really fast negative 0.4 second mana regeneration delay, and a 1 minute and 30 second wet duration reduction. We're going to be taking advantage of that wet duration and soaked debuff, so we want to try and keep this timer as low as possible, which is why I specifically chose a few different pieces of armor, because pretty much all of the new armor pieces in the update have this wet duration reduction on it, and we don't want it to be super low. So the next piece, best in slot for the pants in my opinion, are going to be the Tide Collar pants. This will give us plus 54 flat mana, 12 mana regeneration, and another 2 minutes of the wet duration reduction. Moving on to the gloves, we're using the new Flaming Gauntlets. These are really cool, unique one-off gloves that you can find in a specific town in the new zone. It's going to be right here in a little area called the Gateway Outpost Endflame. If you make your way down to the very bottom floor basement where there's like a bunch of lava and like forges, there's going to be a gold chest in there where you could find these gloves every single time when that chest spawns. So that's how you get that. But what these give us is 12 mana regeneration, which is awesome, 10% increased fire damage, and 18% wand damage. We're going to be taking advantage of our staff a lot in packs of enemies and even single one-off enemies, because we can just stun lock them. However, when we're using our wand, wands actually got buffed and are actually very good in this update as well. So I tend to equally use both the staff and wand now, whereas in my last build, it was primarily only the staff. So having the bonus wand damage and just increased fire damage in general is going to be really helpful. Plus, it gives us plus 3 frost resistance, and we are going to be low on frost resistance, especially if you're fighting stuff in the Albanese Summons territory, like the Fell Dragon boss and stuff like that. In the previous update, all of our armor that we used had the frost resistance built in. We don't have that anymore, unfortunately. So having that few extra points is definitely beneficial. The other secondary option that isn't bad if you don't have these gloves yet is going to be the Tide Collar gloves. This will give you 18% more staff damage, which is nice, 13% damage against magical enemies, and another 1 minute and 30 wet duration reduction. So not as good, because we're going to be swapping on and off between our wand and staff a lot as it is, and having the 13% damage against magical enemies only, compared to the flat 10 fire damage and the 18% flat wand damage. You're going to get more DPS in the late game with the Flaming Gauntlets, but still a pretty good choice if you don't have those yet. Moving on to the chest piece. Similar to my previous build, I like having all of the stats and survivability of the build for every class to be pretty even and balanced and well-rounded. So instead of using the magical chest piece, we're going to be going with the newest upgraded version of the warrior chest piece, same way I did in the previous build. In this case, it's going to be the Sun Piercer chest plate, 201 physical armor, 101 magical armor, and we're going to be getting 360 flat health, 36 flat stamina, and another 3 minutes of wet duration reduction. So really strong and gives us a ton of extra survivability. I've said it a million times in my other builds, I like flat base stat bonuses over regeneration, because ideally 99% of the time you should be having either health or mana potions on you that you can use in a pinch if you really get that low. Plus, some of the skills that we're taking is going to boost a lot of those regenerations in the background anyway. So the flat base, whether it be mana, health, magic damage, things like that. That's what I focus on over regeneration. And then moving on to the helmet, we have two options here, but the best in slot, in my opinion, for this particular build is going to be the new Circlet of Lightning. We're getting 54 flat mana, 18 mana regeneration, 15% increased shock damage, and pretty much all the main spells we're going to be using for our staff and even our wand is going to be shock damage based. And then 21% critical strike chance against soaked enemies. A lot of people were kind of turned off by the soaked enemies perk on some of these armor sets because when the update first dropped, there was a bit of a bug in the game where with the new staff that we're going to be using, even without the Gem of Currents on it, just by attacking with that particular gem in your weapon, you could just instantly soak every single enemy just by attacking, even if you as a player weren't wet. They unfortunately patched that, so now you have to be wet and soaked yourself in order to start proccing that soak status on enemies. But with a few combat items, I'm going to be showing you guys a little trick here in a bit that's basically going to guarantee you have that wet status at all times. So it's a nice little workaround that I'll be sure to show off here. So we will be able to take advantage of that 20% critical strike chance pretty much all the time with this build, so that's why it's really strong. The other one-off piece that's pretty good is the Tide Collar headpiece, so basically the full Tide Collar set if you don't have these two unique items yet. This will give 18% magical critical strike chance, which isn't bad, and a 15% chance 15% bonus to critical strike damage. I'd rather get the flat 21% critical strike chance and the flat 15% shock damage as opposed to bonus damage that only happens on crits. The Circlet of Lightning tends to be a little bit more consistent in terms of DPS, so all around that's why this one is better in my opinion, especially since we're using the shock spells. And where you find the Circlet of Lightning is going to be another new location on the map, just south a little bit more in the new area right here. It's called the Drakdal Camp. It's going to be just northeast of the Gold Rock Saddle. It's going to be up in the mountains, kind of, and you're going to follow little Drak trail encampment that leads you to the top of the peak. Once you get to the top, there's like a little boss arena area. Once you clear out all the enemies, you should see the Circlet of Lightning sitting on a skeleton head on a table, and it should be glowing red and things like that, so you shouldn't be able to miss it. It's pretty visible, and you just grab it off the table once you're done killing everything, and you just get it right away. It's not even in a chest, it's just laying there. So that's where you find that. Moving on, that is the armor that I would recommend. For the rings, we've got a couple options here. I personally like to bring one Ring of the Ancients and one Ring of the Thundersnow. The Ring of the Ancients, classic one, I used to run double of this, gives you some nice health, mana, and stamina regeneration, as well as the only thing we really need is the 5% bonus magic damage. The other one that I'm running now instead of double Ring of the Ancients is the Ring of Thundersnow. This gives us a huge 14 plus mana regeneration rate, plus 6 damage increased to shock, which is 1% higher than the flat 5 magic damage we're getting with the Ring of Ancients. And you actually only get 4 or 5% mana regeneration. 5 for mana regeneration on the Ring of Ancients as opposed to 14 on the Thundersnow, so a lot more mana buffs here as well. We also get plus 10% shock resistance, which is a common element that's used in the new high-end zone, and 2 minutes of wet duration reduction. Between all of the minute wet duration reductions that we have, once you get wet or soaked, out in the world, we should still have at least 6 to 6.5 minutes of wet time if we get soaked, which is plenty enough to clear out and kill any enemies that you know are incoming. With the few tricks, like I mentioned, that I'm going to be showing you guys, you'll be able to constantly refresh that buff. Well, debuff, actually. It's a buff in this case for this particular build, believe it or not. Yeah, you'll be able to refresh that anytime you want with a specific item. So keep that in mind, so we can take full advantage of that, even with the wet duration reduction on there, so don't worry about it. For the shield, I run the Prismatic Ward. We're going to be using our wand a lot, so having this out with your wand gives us 7 additional mana regeneration, 10 ice resist, 10 shock resist, and a decent 268 parry power, despite it being a magical shield and not a regular one, so not a bad overall. I take that mana regeneration for magic builds over just flat parry power any day with a big shield, so that's what I like to run there. And then that is the armor. Moving on to the weapons, we've got a couple choices here based on our level, but the best in slots for this build that I would recommend bringing is going to be the Violet Storm. This is going to be our main staff. This is one of the new staffs. Really, really strong. Has 10% magic shock damage, 5% precision, which gives us 5% critical strike chance, a little bit of spiritual for more mana regeneration, 10% opportunistic, which is a new perk that increases the critical strike chance against soaked enemies. And again, every single enemy that we're going to fight ideally is going to end up being soaked, and 30% ruthless, which increases critical strike damage by 30% against soaked enemies as well. So huge damage boosts against any enemy that's soaked, which is going to be all of them pretty much in the game with what I'm going to be showing you guys. So really, really strong. And for the gem, I would recommend putting the new Gem of Currents. It's not visible right here, but basically what it does at level 50 is it has a 50% chance to basically apply the soaked debuff on an enemy, which not only reduces their stamina and stamina regeneration, but it also reduces their resistances to ice and shock, which is the primary element we're going to be using. And then on top of that, that 50% can trigger a additional 28 shock damage with every single shock proc that we do. And the main core spells that we're going to be using are things like Chain Lightning and Lightning Channel, which tick very, very fast and have a very high chance of critting because it's just hitting so many times. So even though that 28 plus 28 damage seems like a small number, with the amount of hits that we're going to be doing, it actually adds up very, very quickly. So really, really strong gem on this particular staff. It combos really well with the soaked debuff that we're going to be utilizing. So that's the main staff. If you're a lower level, the main staff that I would recommend that's best in slot for early game is going to be the Crystal Water staff. The reason why this one is great is because it has a ton of mana leech and mana regeneration, and until you get all the skill points in the late game to totally fill out your spirit points and the regeneration skills that you can potentially pick up, you may run into some mana issues every once in a while. With this particular staff, you can pretty much cast spells infinitely. The regen is just so high on it that every time you do damage with a spell, you pretty much get instant refill of all of your mana, and it's just really, really handy, and you don't have to worry about being low on spirit or low on mana with your build in the early game as long as you're using this. So that's the early game one I would recommend. And then for the Fell Dragon boss in particular, because it can kind of be tricky to soak him every once in a while. From what I'm told, and I believe the 1 or 2 times I've tested with the Violet Storm staff in particular, you can soak him, but it tends to run out before you can take advantage of it. In that particular instance, another really good option for that one particular like pinnacle boss fight is going to be the Staff of Taurus. This actually has the highest base damage of any staff in the game, even stronger than the Violet Storm, if you're not focusing on the soak status, because it has just really high stats for it's just flat damage for spells. And the perk that I would run, or gem rather, that I would run on this one is going to be the Gem of Battle Mania. And the reason I'm saying that is because while the elixir buff is active, dealing damage activates the Satisfied Battle Mania buff, which gives you a huge boost to your stats. You get 320 flat health. That's basically like you're equipping another warrior chest piece on top of the one that you already have. 201 stamina, which is insane, and 86 mana regeneration. So honestly, if you actually have a duplicate of the Violet Storm, you could potentially throw the Battle Mania gem on this and just use this instead, because you're going to be getting insane mana regeneration from the elixir buff instead of the staff. So both really good options. And the elixir buff you actually get from the elixir potion, which is one of the consumables that I'm going to recommend you guys bring. This was changed a little bit to now give 20% bonus damage against Fell. And as you know, the dragon boss in the Albany Summits is the Fell Dragon. So any Fell damage boost that you can get from things like both the elixir and food items like the Glimmer Gentian Tea, these are 2 consumables that I would recommend swapping out with the core ones that we typically typically use specifically for that dragon boss fight, because that will be, what, 35 bonus damage to the dragon that you're going to be doing just with those 2 consumables, plus all the regen bonuses if your staff has the gem of Battlemania on it. So really strong combo for that one particular fight. The other weapon that I'd recommend using before we get to the wands for that dragon boss exclusively is going to be the Avalanche starter bow. This is probably the best one-off, just straight up damage bow in the game right now. And on that, you want the Gem of Focus Light. Targeting an enemy for a few seconds while aiming puts a mark on it that can stack up to 3 times, doing potentially 225% bonus damage. Basically, actually 450% bonus damage if you get to the full 3 stacks with every single hit that you do. And the only thing that we're going to be using ammo-wise for this is going to be the stun arrows. A great spell to use if you want to go exclusive mage against the dragon boss is going to be the chain lightning spell. That fills the stun meter very quickly, but in comparison to the arrows, because you can just shoot them from so far away, cast it even quicker, like 2 or 3 times quicker than the cast time of a chain lightning spell. If all you're focused on is filling the stun bar and not actually using your spells for damage just to stun him, nothing beats the stun arrows. So for that one particular fight, that boss fight, I would recommend just bringing a high quality bow with the Gem of Focus and a bunch of stun arrows. You can get away, and I'll probably show a demo. If you watch my previous video, actually I do it in the previous old wizard build video. I take him down with only chain lightning, and it works, but the wizard, because of that, ended up being the slowest kill time of any of the 3 classes, because I used the bow on both the archer and the warrior, and it was just like 2 to 3 times faster to fill that stun gauge. So for that one fight, use that. Everything else, all you really need is just the staff and your wands. So for the wand choices, the best slot, in my opinion, is going to be the maxed out Ritual Tempest wand. Really, really strong, and it has fire and shock magic element on it. You get 2 magic fire damage bonuses, 1 magic shock damage bonus, 20% brutal to increase critical strike damage, and a nice 5% precise to increase our critical strike chance. So all around great wand to use, and I would recommend throwing another Gem of Currents on this, because the same way our staff works, with the little combat trick I'm going to show you guys, you will be able to apply the soak debuff on multiple enemies at the same time with your wands as well. So tons of extra damage you're going to get from the shock damage from this wand with that particular gem. The other 2 wand choices that I would recommend bringing, because a lot of enemies have different elemental resistances, would be the Polymath's wand. This is going to be your go-to fire wand. A lot of wildlife enemies and even the youngling dragon fell boss is vulnerable to fire damage, even though it uses a fire attack. So both of these wands are really good against them. And I tend to put a Gem of Burning on it, because it just kind of compounds with the fire damage that it stacks with its base perks, so you get even more benefits from it. So really good combo there, and I use that on just certain particular enemies that are resistant to shock and things like that. If you're going against scavengers, the best wand to use is actually going to be the Helix wand, because they are weak to shroud damage. So between these 3 wands, you should be able to cover all of your bases in terms of elements for basically every single enemy type in the game, and kill them as quickly as possible. I also like to throw a Gem of Currents on this as well, because even though it's shroud damage, with the perk that we have, and the gem combined, we still will be able to soak enemies, which is pretty cool. So all in all, really great set of wands and staffs to use, and the ones I would recommend for the build. I did, for the rings, test out the Ring of Burning Light, because that gives increased fire damage, but it's only 5% as opposed to the 6% increased shock damage. And even though the Polymath wand is strong, the Tempest wand just tended to put out a more consistent, higher base DPS in the end game, so I didn't end up using that. Ring of Tempest and the new Thunder Snow Ring are the 2 that I would recommend there. So those are all the weapon options that I would choose. For the spells, I honestly don't like using crafted spells. I only like worrying about eternal spells. So Fireball, Eternal Fireball 2 is great for taking enemies out long range, and it has really good AoE and can actually proc stuns very easily on enemies, we're definitely going to be taking Eternal Lightning Channel and Eternal Chain Lightning in combination with this spell and several of the skills that I'm going to be showing off here in a minute. You can basically infinitely stun lock any enemy in the game. It doesn't do as much damage as some of the other spells, but when the enemy can't hit you back, it's pretty broken. So even if it takes a little bit longer, it's still very, very useful. And we're actually saving some points in terms of mana regeneration in the skill tree. And what people don't realize is spells like the Eternal Lightning Channel, because it procs insanely quick, is actually one of the best spells in the game to summon the rejuvenation orbs. So we get stamina, health, and mana orbs that can drop. And those will be further buffed to a 30% increase with some of the skills. So literally, if you just stun an enemy with a lightning spell, spam it a couple times to create some orbs, you almost never need to use a health or mana potion. You can literally just teleport, blink through a little cluster of orbs on the ground, and pretty much all of your resources just instantly fill to max again because we were boosting them so high. So really, really strong combo there, and you almost never have to worry about running out of mana or health. In a very rare instance, I like to take Eternal Heal Channel, mainly for the revive gimmick. You typically die before you have a chance to kind of get this off fully. However, if even one green orb is remained floating in the air after you take a fatal hit, it can hit your body and then instantly revive you. So it's like a free revive. You will lose all of your food buffs and things like that, but it's a little get out of jail free card, if you will, in a pinch. So I like to take that if you can get a little escape on enemies for a bit. Moving on, the two few craftable spells that I do like to take, one of which I'm a little on the fence about, are going to be Shock Wisps. This is good. It has a long cast time, but it lasts for 15 seconds. So if you're going into a little battle against a bunch of enemies and you know there's going to be multiple of them, you could cast this 1 or 2 times and just summon a couple minions that help you out and just chain your lightning a little bit more. It does get bonus damage based off all the perks that we're taking as well, so it kind of combos really nicely. So not a bad craftable new spell to take there. And then the other potentially very good one is going to be the Magic Shield. As you know, wizards are the squishiest class in the game, and they actually buffed the hell out of this spell. When the patch first dropped, the shield strength was only like 320, and it basically broke almost instantly, and it was kind of pointless. Now it's actually 1020. So not only does it give you a way higher shield strength, but as long as you're standing inside of it, it blocks all incoming projectile spells and or arrows, and also gives you a huge physical armor and physical damage buff. Like protection, I guess, if you will. So it reduces melee damage, which is pretty crazy. The only downside, and devs, if you are watching this, please take note, is after a bunch of different testing to see how good it was using all the different spell types, the lightning spells, the shock spells, do not work inside of it. You can shoot a fireball through it. You can throw acid bite through it. You can, your wisps can attack outside of it. You can heal channel and ice bolt and things like that from the inside out of it. But the chain lightning and the lightning channel, for whatever reason, if you were standing inside this bubble, cannot be cast. It makes literally no sense. Every single thing that they basically like put in front of us for this particular update kind of pushed us in the direction of shock damage for this particular patch. And for whatever reason, this new magic shield doesn't work with shock spells, which is really unfortunate. If you were able to throw this down in a big fight, especially against like some of the new Drac mini bosses, and just sit there and spam lightning channel from inside of it, like you'd never be able to die because you could take advantage of the physical defense from the shield and like never have to move and just face tank everything while you're like stunning them. But unfortunately, it's just not working right now. So I did want to mention this. It's potentially a very strong spell, especially if you're not focusing on shock and you're going like a fire mage. All of those spells still work. So I would definitely recommend taking it for that. But once the shock spells get fixed, keep this magic shield ability in the back of your mind, because it's going to come in very handy. It lasts for 45 seconds, which is insane. So you just summon it once, stand inside of it, and just face tank everything while you just stun lock every enemy around you. It's pretty wild. So that's if they fix it. So that's the game plan that I plan on running. And even though I don't really use it right now, probably won't use it in the combat demo I'm showing you guys, just remember that this spell exists, and it's going to be a good one once they properly fix it and make the broken spells work when you're using it. So those are the spells that we're going to be taking. Last but not least, in terms of items, let's go over the consumables and buffs and food items. Obviously, you're going to want your best in slots health and mana potions. With the new update, we have the ultimate health potion plus and mana potion plus, which basically instantly refills either of those two bars to max. Definitely more so with the specific skill we're taking. In regards to our orbs, it also increases the potency of potions by like 20% or something like that, I think, which is pretty crazy. I also like taking the new Drac Soulward Flask for obvious reasons. Almost all the enemies in the new update are Drac species, and this gives us 10% bonus damage against them for 45 minutes. I like ice protection lotions because we don't have the frost resistance that we used to have in the old armor. So if you're doing anything in the peaks of the Albanese Summits territory, you're definitely going to want to have a few of these on hand. Wisp of Light. This is one obvious one, just use it in dark areas. The elixir is going to be in combination with the Glimmer Gentian Tea, specifically for the Fell Dragon boss fight, and or anything that you're fighting inside of the Shroud. I would probably swap out the Algae Buds fourth food item in exchange for the elixir, or in exchange for the Gentian Tea, if you're in the Shroud, farming in the Shroud, or going against the Fell Dragon boss. Otherwise, these are the 4 best in slot food items. I also take the Flask of the Fell as well for additional stamina. But the 4 best in slot food items, and yes, we have 4. We're going to be taking Dessert Stomach to give us that bonus food slot, are going to be the Algae Salad. This is a new food item that is insane. Gives us 120 flat mana, which again, I prioritize over mana regeneration. And then 21% magic damage. So this is our big magic damage mushroom type food for us wizards. That's the main bread and butter one. Another really good one in mid to late game, if you don't have the mats for this, is going to be the Yellow Mushroom Soup. That has a little bit less magic damage, but gives you 10% mana regeneration instead. So still a really good food item at lower levels, so I'd recommend that as well. Next up, for our meat slot, we're going to be taking the Meat Wrap, because this gives us 200 flat health, better than regeneration, and 6% magic damage. We want as much magic damage min-max as possible. So I'm taking all the possible magic damage foods that you can get. Moving on to the liquid. We're taking the new latte. This comes in the coffee machine, the brewing machine that you get in the new update as well. This will give us the stamina, flat stamina that we're missing instead of health, and another 6% magic damage. And then last but not least, for a nice boost to our mana pool, is going to be the new grilled algae buds. This is a 140 flat mana buff, which is insane, and basically lets us cast some really heavy hitting spells like Eternal Chain Lightning up to like 8 or 9 times before we run out of mana, which is insane. So really good combination of food items here. These 4 are the best in slots in my opinion. If you're going into something like the Hollowed Halls, obviously you could swap out like the grilled algae buds or the latte for one of the big ectoplasm soups that give you a ton of damage bonuses against enemies that are hollow enemies. So that's kind of an obvious one, but for the main new update and the general world exploring, these are the 4 best in slot food items that I would recommend. And some of these can be a little tricky to craft. They require some pretty high-end materials. If you watch my previous video, you would understand that a farm is very, very important. Let me go ahead and remove water really quick, because it's probably sprung a leak for all I know, and I don't want to deal with it. But what you can do, and what I highly recommend you do in your base, is look up the ingredients for those 4 best food items for each of the classes that you're building for, and then build yourself a very unique farm setup like I have, that has every single one of those crops that you require for those food items at hand. So you can literally make an infinite supply of them at any time, because if you were just manually going out and farming them, it would take forever. But if you've got a nice organized farm like this, it allows you to pull those crops anytime you need them and just have a stockpile of them at hand at any given point. The way I have mine broken up is all of the plots on the far left hand side are all the ingredients I need to make these 4 best food items for the wizard. All the plots I have in the center are the plots used for the warrior build that I have, and all the plots on the right are all the food items needed for my hunter build that I have. So I kind of pre-planned in advance figured out the best 4 food items for all 3 classes, and then made sure my farm had every single one of those ingredients available and at hand right out the gate. So I can make those food items as much as I want, whenever I want. So really, really handy. Now moving on to the skills. Oh. Well, yes, we'll go on to skills, because the combat stuff, the trick I want to show you, will be like the last thing right before the combat demo. So in the early game, this is what I'm going to do a little bit differently. I kind of just straight up told everyone what the skills were last time. I'm going to try and stick to the order that I typically go in. For the early game with this build, before you start ramping up your mana, before you start getting the points for decreased casting time with your staff, and even just in general unlocking your eternal spells, staffs aren't really going to be the route to go. You're going to want to focus on wands first. So I'd really recommend early on to focus on the battle mage tree, as well as take some early points in constitution to increase your base maximum health to give you a little bit more survivability. So in the battle mage tree, we're pretty much taking almost all of these. Point in intelligence, point in arcane deflection, successfully parrying an enemy's attack restores 20 mana. Another point in intelligence, followed by unity. Damaging enemies with wands has a 24% chance to restore 4% of your maximum mana as well. Sting, repeated wand damage is increased by 20%. So if you're going against a beefy boss character, the more times you consistently hit them over and over and over again, your damage will just gradually keep increasing, which is nice. Life burst, defeating an enemy with a magical weapon, which is going to be always with this build, restores health equal to 3 times your intelligence to all players, including yourself, within 15 meters of the target. And just so you guys know in advance, TLDR, we are taking every single point of intelligence you possibly can on this skill tree and have the max 22 points possible. So every bit of magic damage we're milking as we can in this, which is awesome. But moving on, point in spirit, point in intelligence, followed by life essence. This is probably one of the most important skills in this entire build. Your maximum health is increased 5-fold by your intelligence attribute. So the more intelligence we have, 5 times that, we're going to be getting bonus health, which is going to really help mitigate the fact that we're kind of squishy. Really increases our health pool, and you'll see, even though we're a mage, we're going to have a ton of HP by the time all of our buffs are done. And then last but not least, we have Exalted. We're going to be taking the Constitution and the Spirit version of this skill to get those additional points in those particular resources for every 2 levels of flame that we have. So a bunch, I think it's like 3 or 4 extra points we're going to be getting for those 3 stats, just because of how high our flame level is once it's fully upgraded. We're also taking Wand Master. Wand attacks have a 30% chance to spawn double the amount of projectiles. Extra projectiles spawn deal 50% less damage. However, certain spells, or the 2 wands in particular, 3 wands really that we're using, the Helix, the Polymath, and the Tempest Wand, all of those have the ability to spawn multiple projectiles on themselves. So with the Wand Master perk, we can spawn 3 to 4 basically hits with 1 swing at a time when it procs properly, which is pretty crazy. Really can burn down enemies with a wand super fast in this update, which is nice. Moving on, I like to take Blink and Emergency Blink. This is going to replace our dodge roll to get out of danger more quickly, and Emergency Blink allows you to escape when you're stunned or in a trap, which is really, really handy. Moving on to the healer tree, we've got a ton of extra points this time around, so it's actually beneficial to take some of these now. Point in intelligence followed by healer and healer 2 to give us 30% increased benefits from all of our healing spells. Point in intelligence followed by healing revive. Reviving players gives 25% of their health instead of 10%. This is kind of a throwaway. I took it to get the point in spirit and the point in intelligence here on this side of the tree. Next, we are going to be taking Water Aura this time around, as well as Waters of Life. This will ultimately allow us to heal 2 health for every 2 points of our intelligence automatically as soon as we get hit. That's the little blue orb that pops up and just starts chain healing us nonstop until we reach maximum health again. So we just constantly have health regen at all times with this ability. And then lastly, the Shroud filter. This is a good one when you're farming in Shroud areas. Dealing damage with a magical weapon, which is always, has a 15% chance to trigger a small flame burst that restores 30 seconds of time in the Shroud to you and all of your allies within 20 meters. So long story short, if you're in the Shroud and you have this ability, you almost never run out of Shroud time as long as you're just constantly killing things. That timer just keeps going up and up and up and up and up, and you just never run out, which is really, really handy. So you don't have to worry about dying to the Shroud, which can be really frustrating. Moving on to the Wizard tree, this is when you're going to start focusing more on staffs. Once you start unlocking some of these, we've got Point and Spirit, followed by This is the Way. Magic weapon damage in general is increased by a flat 10%. We're also going to be taking the Point and Spirit, followed by Arsonist and Pyromaniac, to give us 30% bonus fire damage, as well as Thunder and Lightning to give us 30% increased shock damage. I don't really use any of the ice spells or the like Shroud Meteor spells and things like that, so I didn't bother wasting points in ice or the dark arts. Gave us some extra points to spend in a few other places that I thought were more beneficial. Pick up the quick point Intelligence, followed by Wizard. This is a big one. Magic weapon critical hits strike chance is increased by 10%. We want as much magical critical strike chance as possible, followed by Chain Hit and Mass Destruction. These two are very important, especially when you're using your wand. It basically gives you a chance on critical strike to deal AoE shock damage to multiple chained enemies in the nearby vicinity. So even if you're targeting one creature with your wand, for example, it can hit like 5 or 6 if they're closely grouped up, which is really nice. And then lastly, the Point in Intelligence for more flat magic damage. Moving on, another big one is going to be Quick Charge. This is a must-have for stabs. It reduces the time stabs required to charge up your spell by 50%. So basically cutting that casting time in half, basically. So really, really important there. Followed by the Point in Spirit and Counter Strike. After receiving damage, there is a 20% chance to reflect 50% of that damage back to the attacker as fire damage, and that does combo with our Arsonist and Pyromaniac skills to do even more fire damage back when it gets countered. So good combo there. Obviously, you want Updraft. We have so much stamina that I feel like the Airborne perk isn't really worth the points. You have plenty of stamina to glide anywhere you want with just one Updraft. So as long as you get that, that's pretty much all you need, in my opinion. Quick Point in Intelligence and Spirit, followed by Be Gone. This is kind of a throwaway one because we'll almost never be unarmed. It does allow you to stun and push back enemies, but we're going to be using shock spells that stun anyway, so this is kind of pointless. But we're taking that to grab the Point in Spirit, Point in Intelligence, and Bloodletting. Critical strikes with spells have a 50% chance to spawn 2 health, mana, and or stamina orbs. Gathering an orb restores 10% of that respective resource. Keep this in mind because once we get to the other side of the skill tree, there's another perk we're going to be taking that's going to boost this to 30% instead of 10, which is going to make those orbs very, very strong. And again, what I was saying before, the lightning channel spell is probably the best spell in the game for spawning these orbs very, very quickly. Next up, one of the most important ones, and the main one that allows us to stun lock enemies basically infinitely, is going to be Terror. Critical strikes with spells stun the target for 4 seconds. So you just AoE a ton of enemies, stun lock them to the point where none of them can move, and you just sit there and lightning them down until they're dead. Really, really strong skill and a really important one for this particular build. Moving on, I'll save these ones for later. But it's basically, well, it doesn't really matter. We're going to be taking advantage of Backstab in this build with just a few points. I think it's like 9 or 10 points. We can get 35 or 45 additional Backstab damage. And because if it was any other spell that we're going to be focusing on, I wouldn't recommend this. But because we're using the lightning spells and the whole gimmick of this build is to stun lock enemies, you stun them, teleport behind them, and you're basically doubling the amount of damage you do instantly if you have these bonus points into sneak attack. So even though it's meant for like a warrior type build, because we're going to be stunning things so frequently, it's very, very easy to line up your hits for a backstab magic damage. So there's no reason not to take advantage of that and just get a huge damage boost and just double your DPS basically with one quick teleport once you stun them. So we will be taking another backstab perk later on that I'll go over here in a minute. But one thing that I did update that I didn't do in my previous build is we're going to start taking some points in the Ranger tree. We're going to be taking the point in Dexterity and Marksman, These ones don't really matter, except for marksman. If you're going against Fell Dragon, this will give your ranged weapon, in this case the avalanche bow, a little bit more damage and kind of fill that stun meter bar a little bit. So you get a little benefit from there for that one particular fight. But the main ones we're going to be focusing on is counter battery. Damage against ranged enemies is increased by 15%. This does work with magical weapons, as well as Eagle Bane. Damage against flying enemies is increased by 30%. This works for magical weapons as well. And then last but not least, the Ranger perk. This gives 2 endurance, which all classes can use. Dexterity, kind of a throwaway, but 5 stamina regeneration, 5% critical chance, and 5% critical damage. Those work on mage builds as well. So even though this is an archer, hunter type perk, these 3 abilities in particular actually work really well on the wizard now. So I make sure to take these because we get those benefits whether we're using a wand or a staff, which is really, really nice. Moving on to the survivor tree, we want to start kind of balancing our stamina now, because that's one of our lower skills at the moment, or perks rather. So the point in endurance will help there, followed by runner, endurance, and wanderlust. This will increase the stamina used when running on dirt roads and just sprinting in general. Obviously, you're going to want to take double jump. This is a must-have in pretty much every build. But moving on, we want good metabolism. This is the perk that I was saying combos with our health orb ability. This is the one that makes orbs restore 30% instead of 10%, but it also makes our health and mana potions restore 20% more resources as well. So if you have even a lesser, it basically takes whatever rating potion you have and instantly makes it a higher tier. So if you didn't have the ultimate premium and plus health and mana potion, if you've got this perk, it's basically like you're having the same thing. If you have this in combination with the ultimate one, it's a 100% fill on your health, 100% fill on your mana, basically anytime you use one of those potions, which is really nice. I also take rebound for 10% bonus stamina generation. Swift shot sustenance. This ain't really going to be a big deal because we're not really going to be using a bow, but we're taking this in order to get backstab, which gives us another 30% backstab damage increased against enemies. So between this one and the one in the middle, it's a that's 25. So you're getting 30, 40, 55% increase to backstab damage just by stunning, teleporting behind an enemy, and attacking from behind. So it's a huge damage boost between those 2 spells. And they're coming from an endurance side of the skill tree, which is pretty crazy. Next, we have Sweet Tooth. This is a throwaway because the main food items that we're choosing are considered sweet category, but we're taking it to grab the point in dexterity and ultimately dessert stomach. This is the one that gives us the additional food slot, so we can have 4 food items instead of 3. And then last but not least, once all of that is taken care of, we want to start focusing more on survivability because we've pretty much taken every offensive skill that we would need, and that is where the tank tree comes in. We should already have at this point the 2 early points in Constitution, so we're going to work our way down and pick up shiny plates and heavy plates. Shiny plates, equipped armor gets 10% increased physical armor, and heavy plates increases the amount of physical damage that your armor can mitigate by another 10% because there actually is a baked-in cap. This will allow you to take 10% more than that cap, which is nice. Quick point in Constitution for more base health, followed by Tower and Warden. Warden will give us 15% magic damage reduction, and Tower will give us 10% physical damage reduction, which is really nice. I take the Absorb perk. When you receive magic damage, you have a 10% chance to restore 1 mana for every point of health lost. So if you're going against big magical enemies, especially some of those fell enemies with like the laser beam attacks and stuff like that, they can burn you down pretty quick. This, if it procs, gives you a really good chance of just instantly refilling your mana bar. So just any extra source of mana regeneration is always nice. Quick point in Constitution, followed by Earth Aura. This is a big one. You emit a protective aura that reduces all damage received by 10%, and this is flat out for you and all allies next to you within 10 meters. So it's just a flat 10% damage reduction across the board. And then lastly, we have Thick Skin. This is the same perk, equivalent for the one that gives us the additional spirit for every 2 levels of flame and intelligence for 2 levels of flame. This does the same one for Constitution. So we're getting 3 or 4-ish additional points in Constitution to give us more base health, just because our flame level is so high. So that is the build. Really, really strong. And I think the only thing left to do now is to go over the combat tips that I recommend to get this build up and running, and then pop all of the buffs that we have and that I would recommend taking when you go out and start exploring, and show you what our final stats are. So the trick that I wanted to show you is, like I was mentioning with the staff, there was a bug in the game where even if your character wasn't soaked or wet, it was still soaking enemies that you hit with the Gem of Currents. They patched that and fixed it, so it got really nerfed into the ground, and people were trying to figure out a way to soak yourself. And the easiest and coolest way that I have found is to just use water balloons. You can use those water balloons, and just most people, the way they use them is they just throw it at the enemy and soak them. But what you can do, because the Gem of Currents will allow you to soak them, instead of a water balloon soaking them with just a normal magical attack, all you have to do is be wet or soaked in order for that to work. And you can do that with the water balloons. So all you need to do is have a stack of water balloons on you at any given point. And this is another reason why I was saying when we went over the armor, why I wanted to keep that wet duration buff, debuff, as low as possible. It's because we actually want that debuff. It's going to actually allow us to soak enemies more easily. But all you need to do is just go to any solid object, preferably a flat wall. It could be a tree stump. I've gone up against an enemy like fortification, things like that. Just equip the water balloon and just throw it at the wall. And as you can see, it soaks yourself instantly. So you have the soak status for 30 seconds. And then if we let this time out real quick and just wait the 20 seconds, it'll show you what the wet duration would be. The soak status reduces the stamina regeneration and whatnot, and wet does as well, but just at a lower percentage. But the Gem of Currents doesn't require you to be soaked in order to soak enemies. You just have to be wet, which is the key thing to keep in mind here. So all you do is throw that one balloon, and after 30 seconds, oh, I'm in the territory, so it's not going to show up. Shoot. Let me go down here just so you guys can see it visually. That was my bad. I forgot that the debuffs run out quicker when you're in your base. So go up to like any tree, throw it at face value, soak yourself. You get 30 seconds of the soaked debuff, which is the stronger of the two. But like I was saying, you only need to be wet. And once this runs out, wait until you see what the duration of the wet buff is. So we got 10 seconds here. 9, 8, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then boom. As soon as the soak status ends, we instantly get 6.5 minutes of wet status, which in this game, if you're just constantly fighting stuff, is a very long time. I can clear out an entire town in 6 minutes, honestly. So all you have to do is just keep that in the back of your mind preemptively, and before you go into a fight, just throw one water balloon at the wall, one or two, soak yourself, and then for the entire remainder of the dungeon or whatnot, you're going to have that buff that allows you to use your staff to soak enemies with your lightning spells. So it works the same way it did before the bug got patched. Just by throwing one water balloon, it'll start giving you that same effect for up to 7 minutes. If you're not using a Thunder Snow ring, and you're using like double Ring of the Ancients, that'll be closer to like 7 or 8 minutes. So even better. So that could potentially be another reason to not use that Thunder Ring if you're just worrying about flat damage, is just to get a longer wet duration buff and not have to worry about it. But honestly, within that 6.5 minute time period, if you notice it's getting low, any wall, any tree, any wooden fortification, just whip out one more water balloon. It takes half a second, throw it against a wall, and just reset the buff again, the debuff again, and get the full 6 minute duration again. So very, very simple trick to keep yourself soaked at all times, and take advantage of that Gem of Currents to give that really strong boost. I mean, when we're soaked and using that Gem of Currents, I mean, just to give you guys an idea again, you're getting 30% increased critical strike damage against soaked enemies, 10% increased critical strike chance against enemies just with this wand alone, bonus lightning damage because of the Gem of Currents, bonus lightning damage because of the circlet, and another 21% critical strike chance on soaked enemies as well. So 21 here and 10% here you're getting 30% critical strike damage and 31% critical strike chance on top of whatever your base critical strike chance is. So you're basically critting almost every hit against enemies that are soaked with this little setup, which is very, very strong. So that is the overall perks. So now let's quickly teleport back to base. I'll go ahead and pop all of the recommended buffs and food items, and we'll go and check out what our final stats are here. So ones that I would recommend getting are going to be the Vaka buff. This actually got changed a little bit. It used to just be a melee damage bonus, but if we take the blessing now and then go to our character, this one's actually still pretty useful because it now gives us a 10% poison resistance buff and a 20% bonus damage against scavengers. So it's not just a melee buff anymore. It actually works against a enemy type instead, so even wizards can take advantage of this now, which is pretty awesome. And there is a bunch of scavengers even in the Veilwater Basin area, so really good buff to take advantage of there. I would also recommend popping the elixir buff to get the benefits from that against fell enemies. We're going to want to pop our algae, our meat, our latte, and our algae buds. Go ahead and pop our flask for more stamina, and then our Drask potion, because we're probably going to be in the Veilwater Basin killing Drac anyway. And so, oh, and don't forget your pet. Go ahead and pet your cat or dog, and that actually gives you another buff that we can grab. So we go to statuses here. That one's called Pause Touch, so a nice little 25 flat health bonus there as well. So with all of that combined and all of the buffs that I would recommend, you have a 2-hour almost rested buff because of all of the stuff that we're going to be getting. So that's increased stamina regeneration and flat stamina because of the rested buff. And with the rest of our perks here, we are sitting at 1,585 health, very tanky for a mage, 868 mana, insane amount of mana, and 522 stamina, more than enough for a wizard. We're getting plus 45% melee damage, 65% range damage, because we are taking some ranger perks, and 158% magic damage, which is insane. We're sitting at 16 constitution for base health, 20 spirit, gives us a ton of mana, 12 endurance, 8 strength, 12 dexterity, and a max 22 intelligence. So ton of magic damage there. Healing and whatnot, not a big deal. The only time I really heal is with potions, so not a huge issue there. But moving on to damage, this is where it gets crazy. We have 155% critical damage, 15% critical chance, 10% of that as magical, and actually gets increased by another 30 to 35, like we mentioned, once we start soaking enemies. So that one actually isn't even reflected in here. It's actually going to be a lot higher than what it says here. So keep that in mind. But we also get plus 65% backstab damage, which is crazy. Once we start stunning enemies and teleporting behind them, it is a instant, like doubling your damage almost. 15 bonus percent damage to all ranged enemies, so enemies using a bow or flying enemies really, and flying enemies are actually 30, so huge boost there because of the ranger perks we're taking. We also got 10% to Drac because of our flask, 20% to Fell because of the elixir potion. This would actually be 35 if you swap the algae buds for that Fell Gentian tea for the Fell dragon fight, so big boost against Fell enemies there, and 20% for scavengers because of the Vaka buff. We have an 18% damage bonus on wands, 10% damage bonus for bows. Nothing to the staff, but that's okay because the spells themselves are getting boosted in terms of element, as you'll see here in a minute. 40% bonus fire damage, 51% bonus to shock damage, and that gets further increased against soaked enemies as well. So ton of extra shock damage there. And then production, not a huge deal, but as you can see, it's pretty well balanced overall. 392 physical and 410 magical. So we don't have a higher one against any other particular stat. We're pretty even keel balance against any type of enemy across the board. So a really good balance there. So as you can see, really strong, really well balanced stats. And the weapon choices that we have this time around are really cool too. I love the new stun mechanics that you can do with the soak status effect now. I think that was a really cool addition that they added. So yeah, that is the new broken wizard build for the Wake of the Water update. I'll probably let you guys go here now and leave you with some combat footage of how the like stun effects work, and maybe even one of the boss fights to kind of just demo what this build is capable of. But yeah, if you guys enjoyed it, if you found it informative, be sure to smash that like button and comment down below. I appreciate all of you guys' feedback. And if you want to keep up to date with my future Enshrouded content, I know I mentioned I've got the Hunter and Warrior build still on the way. Consider subscribing and turn on that notification bell so you don't miss any of those future uploads. And then last but not least, if you want to join a really killer community of like-minded gamers, feel free to check the links down in the description and join us on the Discord. We've got over 1,000 members in there now, many of which are playing Enshrouded and always looking for new people to play with. So hopefully you guys jump in and we see you guys around here soon. But until the next one, hope everyone has a great day, and we'll see you all later.